Greetings, 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 everyone. Welcome to Create Yourself Imagery, Intimacy, Innovation, a place where people from all walks of life in various backgrounds come to share their transformative personal and professional stories of restoration, confidence, clarity, and empowerment. I'm Joyce Kiles, your global speaker, life and leadership thriving coach. And if you're ready to transition, transform, and thrive, this is the podcast for you. Today's guest, I am so very excited to have. I met her a few months back at a conference and we just instantly hit it off. We bonded. We realized that we have so many personal and professional things in common. And so I knew that when I got this podcast going, that she was someone I would hope would say yes, and she did. So I am excited to share with you who she is, what she does, and all the great things. So Deborah Halvorson is passionate about helping people to help themselves. She is the owner and founder of Through the Jungle LLC, a life coaching business whose primary focus is to assist sexual assault survivors to create and experience a life beyond surviving. She walks along with each client on their journey of healing, hope, and empowerment beyond surviving. Deb is a certified professional coactive coach, trained and certified by the Coactive Training Institute. She is a certified trauma informed coach, a trained sexual assault advocate, and an ACC certified, which is Associate Certified Coach. For those who may not know what ACC stands for, that is Associate Certified Coach through the International Coaching Federation. She is the author of the recently published book, Out of the Basement Beyond Surviving Sexual Assault. The book is an invitation to all survivors to access their inherent courage, resilience, and strength. Deb's personal story involves recovery and healing from her own traumatic past of sexual assaults and trafficking. She knows firsthand the courage that it takes to face your past and the ever looming temptation to return to what's familiar, even if it's harmful. Her story also involves alcohol and drug addiction. She is active in a 12-step recovery program and has served others like her for over 40 years. She is the one, the only, very phenomenal certified trauma informed coach and award winning author, Deborah Halvorson. Deborah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joyce. It's very nice to be here.
I appreciate you saying yes to me. It is we I shared in the very beginning. You and I have so many things professionally and personally in common, and I knew you would be someone that our listeners would be glad to connect with. So we're just going to jump right on into the questions. My first question to you is tell us about your create yourself journey and what made you decide that this was the right path and the right time for you.
That's such an interesting question because I spent close to 33 years in a career in the legal profession, litigation,
Wow.
and um, and so during those 33 years that I was in this other career, I was also working through my sexual assaults and my family upbringing and everything that came with that. And so once I got to a certain point in my healing, it started to feel like litigation and the law just didn't quite feel right. I felt like I wanted to give more back, to be of more service to people who've gone through exactly what I'd gone through.
Mhm.
Um, so I moved into the coaching profession. And in 2016, I quit my career I was a litigation paralegal, and I quit my career and moved into and went back to school for coaching. And I got to tell you, what a journey, because when I first became a coach, coaching sexual assault survivors was absolutely not what I wanted to do. In
Mhm.
fact, in fact, I was very specific about it. I don't want to do that. And it's so funny because when you protest something too much, you kind of know that maybe that's where you're going to end up. And so,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
and I think that the reason for that at that time, because this was 2016, it was I just hadn't gotten to a place in my own healing where I felt like I could help others move beyond surviving. And so it took, a couple more years for me to decide, you know what? I think this is where I need to land. And so even before I became a certified trauma-informed coach, I started writing my book, Out of the Basement Beyond Surviving Sexual Assault. Um, and so I'm not really sure that I had in mind a vision or a creation for what I'm doing right now. It just sort of evolved. It evolved from my healing and from my need to be of more service to others. And so it was almost as if those two things got in my head, and then the universe or God, whatever you want to call it, kind of took over and unfolded.
Mm. I love that journey and again learned something new then. So I did not know that that was the background that you came from. So another commonality that we have is I've always loved, enjoyed criminal justice, and that was one of my areas of concentration in college.
Yeah.
So much so I wanted to be a prosecutor. That was my plan.
Yay.
And yeah, and it like you said, took a completely different turn. And it's amazing how the thing that you run from, the thing that you think, I absolutely don't want to do this. I'm not going to do it, whether it's from your own lived experience or it just seems like I should be going a different path or this pays more or whatever the thing may
Right,
be.
right, yeah.
When you are purposed to do a thing, then no matter how much you run from it, it's going to find you. And
Oh,
then at some point,
so
you just
true.
get tired of running, don't you, Deborah? Just get
You
tired of
do.
running.
And it's almost like you cry uncle and say, okay, okay. Now, what am I supposed to do with this information or this thought or this vision, whatever it is that will not leave me? What am I supposed to do with it now? And I think that once I asked that question, and maybe that's how it happened to you as well, Joyce, once I asked that question, it just started to open up. I don't know, it felt like it was something beyond me, and it just sort of opened.
So that's a good segue then, Deb, to get into the next part of the question or the next question I'd like to ask. And that's about your book, Out of
Yeah,
the Basement Beyond Surviving Sexual Assault. So tell our listeners about the book, your inspiration behind it, just all the things you'd want us to know.
I think the biggest inspiration that's behind this book is the fact that no matter how much time has passed since your sexual assault, um, no matter how much, for me, I can only speak for myself, no matter how much therapy I seemed to have, there was always this residue. There was always this left behind residue of my sexual assault experiences that I couldn't shake. And for many, many years, Joyce, I didn't know what to call it, and I actually didn't know what it was. But through the process of writing this book, Out of the Basement Beyond Surviving Sexual Assault, it occurred to me that the residue is what I needed to deal with to move beyond just surviving a sexual assault. And the residue I define as that stuff that we still carry, that we take with us from the perpetrator: shame,
Mm-hmm,
self-blame,
mm-hmm,
and never safe emotions. And that residue, um, and I have to be careful here because I don't want to assume that it's the same for everyone, but I am going to use the term we because I think all sexual assault survivors carry some sort of residue. Um, but it's this residue that we carry through our entire lives. And sometimes we don't even know how to identify it, because we're not always thinking about the sexual assault, right?
right,
And we
right.
get to a point where it's like, okay, it's just that thing that happened to me over there, and that was a tragic trauma, horrible thing. But what I didn't think about was, why do I always feel so shameful? Why does every time, like in the legal profession, why every time I make a mistake on a case, I feel like I'm this horrible, awful person. Okay, it's a mistake.
Mm,
Calm
mm,
down. Why did I always feel like whenever I had issues in my relationships, whether it was with my husband or whoever, that it was kind of my fault because I was sort of defective. And
mm,
so it's my fault. All of this blaming myself for things that are happening around me. And the third thing that occurred to me is, why do I never feel safe? Like, whether it's
wow.
whether it's a scarcity mindset, never having
Mhm,
enough money, never having enough food, never having whatever, so that doesn't make me feel safe. And why am I never safe in my home? I
mm,
just I just don't, especially when it starts to get dark. Never felt safe. And that's the residue that I address in this book that was extremely important for me to walk through, to figure out, how do I unload some of that. I mean, my body is actually, my shoulders are actually moving right now like I'm trying to shrug something off. But it's like,
mhm,
how do
mhm,
I move out from under that residue? And I thought, Joyce, if I'm experiencing this, I can't be the only one.
mhm.
There must be numerous other people out there who have been sexually assaulted or sexually abused in some way that are still carrying this residue left behind by the perpetrator. And
Wow.
that was my thought process with the book. And I started writing it in April of 2019, and I
Oh,
finished
wow.
it.
Okay.
It got published. It got published and is, sold for people. It started to be available to the public on April 2nd, 2024. So it took me a long time to write it, and it's not very long.
Wow. I don't think there's a time frame. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that it's not very long, but it took a while to write it. Because
Yes,
anytime you are sharing personal lived experiences, no matter what they are, I often say that our journey is our journey and it's our walk. In fact, my nonprofit used to be called Walking into a New Life. And
yes,
I used to tell people all the time that it is a journey. It is a lifelong journey of peaks and valleys and great moments. And there
right.
are periods of resiliency. And then there are periods of restoration when we finally start to feel a sense of, I am restored in
Yeah,
certain aspects of our lives. And finding the courage to write about your experiences, I think is phenomenal. It is a wonderful way to elevate this idea of what it means to transition, transform, and to thrive. And
yeah.
so I would just love for you to talk a bit more about the surviving parts of it for you and for others and what it gives to others, surviving and thriving, because we talked a lot off air about moving from the experiences into what it means to survive and thrive and to be happy, and what does that look like. So I'd love for you to share with our listeners about that surviving piece and that thriving piece and what it gives to you and to those whom you work with.
Oh, I think that's a great question. And um, the book itself has 5 steps, has
Okay.
five very simple steps that have helped me and others, because I have a community of sexual assault survivors that we talk, we share our experiences, our healing, all of that, which has been extremely important for me in my healing. But I think that before I could get to the thriving part of it, which does definitely come, I had to kind of do what all 5 of these steps say. And is it okay if I just kind of tell
Oh,
you what they are?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, because the first thing that I had to do was I had to acknowledge that I had been sexually assaulted. I had to quit calling it a bad family life. I had to quit calling it just that thing that happened to me. I had to call it sexual assault.
Hmm.
And and then the next thing I had to do and I had to work through, and remember, this is over a long period of time, okay? I didn't just
Sure.
do this over 5 days, right? I had to say it was not my fault.
Mm.
And it seems as though that's sort of a no-brainer, but when you're talking to a sexual assault survivor, there is that piece in the back of all of our minds that if only I would have done this differently, if only I would have done that differently, if I
Right.
hadn't drank that night, if I hadn't worn that shirt, if you know what I mean? All of that.
Yes, I do.
And
Hmm.
and that has to go. That has to go because it's not our fault. Absolutely not our fault. Oftentimes you'll hear young women. I've talked to many college age young women who will say, "Yeah, but I got drunk that night. I got drunk that night." And my response is, "Well, just go back to when you were getting ready to go out. You were picking what you were going to wear, you were putting on some makeup, you were doing your hair, and you and your friends are figuring out, what bars you're going to go to or what parties you're going to go to at any time in that process. Did you plan for a sexual assault?" And
Mm.
the answer is
Wow.
no. No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
absolutely not. You plan to have fun that night. This is
Right.
just one example, but you plan to have fun that night. And you you were the victim of a sexual assault. Not your fault. 100% not your fault. Okay, so that's like the first process. The first thing that I had to the first step that I had to take for myself is that I had to pull it to the forefront of my mind. Very good at pushing things way to the back.
Hmm.
I don't want
Hmm.
to deal with this. Forget it. I can't do anything about it, so why even think about it, right? Well, it's got
Right.
to come forward, and I got to go through that process of it's not my fault. I was sexually assaulted, and it was not my fault. The second thing I had to do, and this was again with this community of sexual assault survivors and people who knew what it was like to go through the same thing, is that I had to come to believe in my own inherent strength. In the book, I call it
Mm.
an inherent spiritual connection. And I don't, and also in the book, I give people the freedom to call that spiritual connection whatever you want. But I believe this to my core, we have a very strong spiritual divinity within each one of us, and it
Hmm.
connects us to a greater divinity. We all have that. And we have to bring it forward because that's our strength, that's our courage, that's our resilience. And that is what will move us beyond our shame, our self-blame, and restore our sense of safety. So that that's a whole process in and of itself. And the book talks about
Yeah.
different ways that you can tap into your own spiritual connection, and it's inherent. We're born with
Hmm.
it, I
Hmm.
believe. We're born with it, but it doesn't come out on its own. We gotta,
We
we
have to help
gotta
it
ask
along.
for it. Absolutely. We gotta ask for it. And so it's using that spiritual connection and believing that that will move us beyond our shame and our self-blame and restore our sense of safety. The next thing that had to happen for me was I had to become aware of this constant negative self-talk, constant
Mm. Mhm.
negative self-talk in my life. It's a conditioned response. At least it was for me. I don't know for anybody else. It was a very conditioned response. Um, and it was tied to many, many negative and limiting self-beliefs. these could have been things that have been with me ever since I was a little kid. And in my situation, yes, because my abuse started at a very, very young age, very young age. And so I was conditioned to believe that I was unlovable. If I
Mhm.
was
Okay.
lovable, this stuff wouldn't be happening to me.
Mhm.
So if that is your reference point, that you are unlovable, what kind of choices do you think you're going to make? What kind of what
Right.
kind of relationships do you think you're going to have? And if that's my premise, is if that's my perception of myself, then my life is going to reflect that. And
Mhm.
so the third step that I really had to work on is that I had to use this spiritual connection that I had developed just to start to become aware of these underlying negative self beliefs, which are very limiting.
Mhm.
I had to learn how to quiet the negative self talk. Negative self talk for me comes from negative and limiting self beliefs. That's not too complicated. Does that sound complicated?
Mm, no,
Okay.
it makes perfect sense.
Okay. Okay. Okay, good. And so the constant negative self-talk, which just keeps you on a hamster wheel, doesn't it? You just keep
Absolutely.
going
It's a
round
tape
and round.
recorder that does not shut off, or so it
Absolutely.
seems. Mhm.
Absolutely. And so I've got skills and tools in there and different things that you can work on to try to shut that down. And with every step that's in here, it's a how to apply it. Okay? So
Mhm.
I mean and it's basically, Joyce, what I did and what worked for me and for this community of sexual assault survivors. The next thing that I had to do was that I had to take a look at the relationships that I was in. My
Mhm.
personal relationships, and identify how the sexual assault had affected each relationship, but particularly the relationship with myself. I mean, if I'm coming from a premise
Wow.
of I'm unlovable, then I don't have self-love.
Right. Right.
And if I don't have self-love, what kind of partners am I going to choose? What kind of relationships am I going to choose? And so step four is about examining those personal relationships. And I've got a list of questions in there on what you can ask yourself. And then step five is continuing to keep moving forward with the spiritual connection and breaking the chains that hold us back, and start sharing your story. Start sharing your story of healing, hope, and empowerment so that other
Mhm.
sexual assault survivors can get to the same place that you are. And we can form this community where it's not embarrassing to say we're sexually assaulted. It's not shameful. We all
That
get
is
it. We
exactly right.
understand it.
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And Deborah, one of the things that of so many things that have come up for me in you sharing these five steps, I am thinking about what I do and have done for so long as it relates to working with and alongside those who have been impacted by domestic violence.
Mhm.
And how much we may talk about the physical aspects of the abuse, but then there are all these other layers that and intersections that we don't
Yes,
always address. And so much of what you shared from a sexual assault perspective can just as easily be applicable to those who have gone through domestic abuse on some level.
absolutely.
And I share
Absolutely.
often that these things, they are interconnected, and these feelings that you talk about, the relationships that you talk about, you know, connecting with that inner self, that inherent spirit within us, however you believe, all of those things are very applicable. Acknowledging it and saying that it wasn't your fault, like,
Huge.
just it's just hearing you share that, and I'm thinking about, like I said, the things that I do in that realm, in that space. That's why I said I knew that there was so much energy and synergy that we had in that short time that we were talking. I knew that yeah, there was more to talk about and more to pull out because there is life after. There is surviving, and you are showing and sharing ways in which that surviving can actually take place. And you can heal, that you
You
can
can
truly heal.
heal. Yes, and you can move beyond the surviving, and you don't have to have your sexual assault or your childhood abuse or whatever back in the closet in the back of
Right.
your head, with a lock on it. No, it needs to come forward because it's part of you. It's part of you. And so we got to bring it forward, and
Yes,
and we got to
yes,
integrate it into who we are, and integrate it by loving that person, by loving
yes.
that person and saying, it wasn't your fault, honey. Let's just let's move forward here. Let's move
Yeah.
forward here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's move forward. And I love that. Just keep moving forward. Healing is an ongoing journey, but it is possible to find ways to heal and be happy and find wholeness and wellness. Deborah, this is such a great conversation. Um, I think as we start to wrap up our conversation and time together, I'd like to know what main points, because you've shared so many, so, is there anything in particular that you definitely want our listeners to walk away with?
I want your listeners to mostly walk away from um, with the idea of creating community within
Mm,
within the sexual assault survivors. And I'm not talking about community where we all get together and discuss our trauma and everything that happened to us. I'm talking about creating a community where we can walk into a room, and maybe for an hour once a week or once a month or whatever, we talk about what we're doing to heal. What's our life like? What's maybe holding us back? Maybe we discuss a book. Maybe you discuss Out of the Basement, Beyond Surviving Sexual Assault. But that community is so healing and so important, and it alleviates the isolation that comes with
yes,
being a sexual assault survivor. Because there's
I
so
love
many
it.
of us, so many of us. So form your community, even if it's just one or two other people, that's a community.
Good.
Support
Say
each
that again. Say that again.
Even if it's just one or two of you, that's a community. That's a community of survivors right there. And you support each other.
I think that that is so important for people to understand. You don't have to have a huge group of
Right.
folks gather together with whom is willing and open and ready to gather. That
Yeah.
is community. That is the true definition of community. So,
That is
Deborah,
community. Yes.
how can people get in touch with you, support you, get the book, your coaching services? How do we get in touch with you?
The book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's also available on my website.
Okay.
And my website is throughthejungle.org. And on that website, Joyce, will be information about my what I offer for coaching
Okay.
beyond sexual assault. Um, and you can also buy my book on my website. If you'd rather not buy it on my website, go to Amazon, go to Barnes and Noble. I think even independent bookstores can order it. A lot of them don't have it in stock, but they can order it. And I believe that my email address is on my website. It's deb@throughthejungle.org.
Okay, lots of ways to get in touch with you, lots of ways to connect with you, to engage you, to support you, to honor you. I am holding space for you and lift you up in the work that you are doing. It is phenomenal. It's amazing. It is definitely needed. So I'm so glad that you made time and space for us today. I do want to ask you as we wrap up just one other thing. Do you have any events that are coming up, anything else that you want to promote, any products outside of your books and your coaching?
No, I don't. No, you had asked me that question a while ago, and at that time I did have an event that was coming up, but they changed the date and now I can't go. So
Okay.
I don't have any events coming up right now. I've put in
Okay.
proposals for some different conferences and stuff, but I won't hear about whether or not I will be able to be a speaker at those until mid-April.
Okay. So what I will encourage everyone to do as they're listening is to just get connected with you, because if they're connected with you, they can follow your journey and know, where Deb's speaking next kind of thing, whatever books you have coming up, your coaching services, just all the things. So even if you don't have anything that's coming up in this particular broadcast, I know that you will. So if people elect to follow you, then they'll be able to keep up with you, which I strongly and highly encourage everyone who's listening to do so.
Absolutely. My website is the best way to look at me. I mean, to look at me, to find out more about me. That's the best way. I don't do much on social media because it causes me anxiety. So
Mhm,
I
mhm.
don't.
I understand.
I do have an Instagram page, but I don't post anything to it or anything like that. And so best thing is my website.
Okay, which will be listed in the marketing piece of this broadcast. So people will be able to
Fabulous.
readily access it and then go from there with the website and learn all about, how to connect with you for your services as well as your books. So,
Great.
with that being said, I want to thank our very special guest today, Deborah Halvorson. Thank you so much for your time, your talent, your energy, and your story, and helping us to move beyond surviving and into a place of healing, happiness, and wholeness. So, thank you so much for taking time to be here.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I very much appreciate it.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in today. Until next time, go forward and create the life you desire and deserve at any age. Let's continue to transition, transform, and thrive together. I'm your host, Joyce Kiles. Until next time, see you later.